Communities have come to these shores and they've merged with the existing community. Now, the challenge that we've got today is that there's some early warning signs that we're not integrating quite as well. And you mentioned a couple. English language is not being spoken quite as broadly, and that's often in areas of very high concentration of people from the same ethnic group and people born overseas. So we want to make sure that we can maintain our successful multicultural community going forward.
So what are your fears here? Is it that we're going perhaps down the same path as Europe, where they do have high ethnic tensions in some of their major cities?
Yeah, that's partially right. We have a unique model of multiculturalism in Australia, rooted in integration, not assimilation and not separatism as sometimes occurs in Europe. And we want to maintain our unique model. And that importantly means that migrants need to be able to speak some basic English. They need to integrate into the community and adopt Australian values. And that's what we would like to see in place before you become a citizen.
Okay, so is the answer here less immigrants, which is what was proposed by your former leader, Tony Abbott? He'd like to see the number halved to 100,000. Or is the solution helping them to integrate better once they are here?
Listen, my focus is on the latter. I think we can become a bigger Australia if the infrastructure keeps up, and most cities are, although Melbourne, particularly where I'm from, hasn't been keeping up on that front. My focus is on integration. If we integrate well, then we can, of course, accommodate more people, and we've been remarkably successful at this to date, where we've welcomed people from across the globe and they've largely got along very well. But as I said, we need to work on this because we can't take the future for granted just because we've been successful in the past.
Okay, I mean, you talked there about wanting to help them integrate better, yet your government has cut funding to the very programs that do that, language training programs.
Well, that's not true. In fact, we've increased the funding by about 25% since we came to office. It sits on around $300 million per year at the moment, and that means that a migrant with poor English can get up to 1,000 hours of English language training. You know, that's the equivalent of doing 10 hours a week every week for a couple of years. We want to help migrants learn better English so that they've got the best opportunities of being able to communicate with others and take advantage of all the great things that Australia has to offer.
So you're saying there are programs in place, if you come here as a new immigrant tomorrow, that there are programs in place where you can learn English to help you integrate?
Absolutely, there are. And as I said, up to 1,000 hours. You can do 2 hours a day, every day, for 2 years. And we think that's a reasonable amount of support for a person to get up to speed. If they need more on top of that, of course, they can purchase their own English language classes on top of that. But it's in their interest, Ali, to learn English as much as it's in society's interest, because when they've got better English, they've got a better chance of getting a job, they've got a better chance of broadly communicating with the broader population and taking advantage of everything that Australia has to offer, which is a great amount.
But are you suggesting if these new immigrants don't speak great English that they're not good Australian citizens?
Not suggesting that at all. What we are proposing is to say that there should be an English language test before you become a citizen. Now, when this comes through...
So you're limiting who's actually going to be coming into the country?
No, not doing that. Many people come into the country on, say, a 457 visa or a student visa, and then they transfer into permanent residency and citizenship. What this proposal is before you become a citizen, and that's typically 4 years after you've been in the country, you should be able to speak a basic level of English. You should be able to demonstrate that you've adhered to Australian values, and you should be able to demonstrate that you've made an effort to integrate into the community. We get those 3 things right, then we guarantee our successful multicultural model.
Okay, now you're also talking about reintroducing strict citizenship laws that would add a 3-year waiting period before migrants can access welfare. Now, this is something that both Labor and the Greens have opposed in the past, saying that it is way too harsh. So, I mean, how are you expecting to get this through the Senate?
Well, there already is a waiting period of about 2 years generally, so we're only slightly extending it for certain classes. Now, we'll obviously have negotiations with the crossbench in relation to this, but there's a broad point here that migrants who come to this country, they tend to want to come because they want to work and they want to contribute. That's been the model that's been successful for decades and decades now, and we want to ensure that that continues.
Okay, but I mean, do you think you're going to get the numbers? I mean, the Greens and Labor are not going to be behind this. if you're pushing this forward, do you think you can actually get it through?
Oh, we hope so, and we'll have good negotiations with the crossbench in relation to it.
Have you had those talks so far?
I've had very good discussions with the crossbench so far in relation to these matters. Now, we're not rushing it. We're taking them through the details. We're talking to the Australian community in relation to these issues. I've got to say, Ali, I'm very disappointed with the Labor Party. I cannot see why they don't think English language is important to be the glue to our community. It always has been. And if you lose the English language as being the glue to our community, then our community will start to fracture a little bit. So we think it's vital. I don't understand the Labor position who doesn't think that English language is important in Australia anymore.
Well, Minister, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Ali.